Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for Coffee Chat and Cybersecurity Threats for Small to Mid-Sized Company. This program is being recorded and will be shared on our Chamber website for future listening. Before we get started, we strongly encourage you to please turn on your cameras if you're comfortable, that we're going to see all your smiling faces and we can connect virtually. This program is for everyone to have an open dialogue, so to feel free to ask questions or submit questions on the chat box. With few resources than most of our business have few resources than our larger companies, many small to medium-sized business lack the financial resources and personal expertise to identify the trouble or defend against a cyber attack, making them a attractive target for cyber criminals. Recently, SBA research showed that 88% of the small business surveyed actively worried about their vulnerability to a damaging cybersecurity attack. This topic is very critical and important for businesses to understand the latest security threats and how to protect their personal and financial data. In fact, this now is a national issue with a lot of our chambers and our Congress trying to deal with these issues. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming our presenter this morning is Leslie. I shouldn't try that hard. Pedinaris, and I probably missed.
Close enough.
She is an attorney with Moore and Allen in Charlotte, North Carolina. She works with clients to develop comprehensive legal and communication strategies for federal and state legislative impact and compliance for the public affairs team. She guides clients through privacy and security issues for the privacy team. Leslie, thank you for joining us, and you may begin.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you all for being here and taking some time out of your day to talk about something that people are not dying to talk about first thing in the morning. And we were just chatting a little bit about it before, and I commend all of you for taking this time out. Most people learn about cybersecurity at a time of great crisis, and that is a difficult time to learn about things. So I'm hopeful that everyone here is safe for today and just taking some time to learn about things in advance so that when things happen, and they will happen, you have a little more understanding and know the right questions to ask and the people to go to. So we hope that this will be interactive and you will want to share some of your experiences. I know so many of you have some, unfortunately, and we will just do it as a workshop. So let's get started. Simone, next slide. Hopefully. Great. I know that you all work very hard to get your reputation for your companies to be what you want them to be. And in just a very few minutes, that can be ruined with a cyber incident. So I'm very thankful that you're all here to start thinking about it and being prepared for something. Next slide. Just to give you an overview of the issues that we're going to be talking about today, some cybersecurity events and defining phishing, hacking, ransomware, and then some steps about what you can do when it happens to you, and also run through a little bit of a tabletop exercise that gives you a real-time experience as to how things happen, how they unfold, what you need to be doing. Next slide. Here's some, and next slide, sorry. Here are some of the, next slide. Here's some of the terms that you might want to be familiar with if you aren't already. Phishing and hacking. Phishing is the most common form of cybersecurity attack. And really what this is being scammed. We were just talking a little bit about, getting phone calls, about the IRS calling you to tell you that you are about to be arrested unless you call with a credit card number, because that's the way the IRS works, which they do not. We are susceptible in our personal lives for these kinds of things. Our parents are. Those of you with older parents know you constantly are getting phone calls about, why am I getting this charge to a credit card I don't have. No, you don't have that card. You can move along. But asking those questions is what keeps you from becoming a victim of fraud. The same applies here. Your employees are getting emails constantly, phone calls, asking for things that they may or may not remember that sounds familiar. Training is extremely important with your employees. If any of your employees or yourselves, because it's happened to the best of us, we've had things go around in our firm where people that you would never expect in a million years to fall for things have written back and said, oh, I did that. I'm sorry. How do I fix this? If you are getting an email that has misspellings in it, has your CEO is sending you an email and they've never done that before on a Sunday afternoon, asking you for a routing number because they are out of the office and need something done, your alarms should be set off. That is not the way your CEO has ever worked before. So ask some questions before you do those things. Those ways in is how the cyber attackers get in. They get employees to click on things, and then all of a sudden something is embedded in your system. The Berkeley Chamber of Commerce was generous enough to share an example that they had happened to them recently, or within the last couple of years. Their phone system was hacked, where thousands of dollars of overseas phone calls were charged to their account. And if you just pay out bills and don't take the time to look through them, might not recognize that something like that is happening. And if you have outdated systems, that might be something you look at. An old phone system that worked 20 years ago might not work right now. And there could be some things that you can do to prevent these kind of things from happening. If you get a bill from a company that just looks routine, like you always get, but maybe it's on a different day than they usually send it, take a second and think it through and say, have I already paid this bill? Is this the right person at that company that I would send this bill to? And I know that they've shared this example with me that they received a vendor's bill that looked like a bill that they generally did, and they paid it out and then found out from the vendor that it was not their bill at all. And now I think their proactive steps were to keep a running list of dates and contact people and all the vendors that they do send bills out to, so they can check them off and stay on top of things. Basically, when we get a little bit comfortable and lazy, that's when these kind of things can sneak in. Next slide. Phishing also leads us to ransomware, and that is the issue that a lot of municipalities have been dealing with, and now we're hearing in the news about bigger infrastructure companies are dealing with ransomware. Next slide. So ransomware also comes in through phishing. It's, an employee gets an email, they click on a link, all of a sudden that is an attachment that begins downloads that might have some malicious software, which goes on to encrypt the files and cut out access to the entire network. They're becoming more and more common in the United States. In 2020, we saw an increase of 7%. We're up to about 30%. And especially over this last year, while so many of us have been working remotely, companies are relying more and more on systems tapping into their network so that their employees can work remotely. And that causes vulnerabilities. While you're in your office, someone could look behind your computer and say, wait a second, that's not something you should be checking on. But if you're working out of your teenage son's bedroom, not necessarily someone walking by to help you figure that out. So also, sometimes you'd get an email and say, wait a second, does this sound familiar? Because you've got someone sitting next to you. But if you're working remotely, that might not be available to you. So be aware of those things when you're in the office and when you're out of the office. Next slide. Some industries are impacted a little bit more than others, and you can figure out why. There's money involved, and there's there's more to get. If you're attacking a healthcare company, then there's a lot of information involved there that can be leveraged if you're one of the bad guys. But some of the industries that have seen an increase over the last year: manufacturing, professional services, public administration, utilities and transportation, things that seem vital. And the ransomware is the issue. It had been previous that they were attacking information to get credit card information, to get just scraping as much data as possible. Now, with ransomware, what they can actually do is shut down an entire system. And if your water system goes down, if your energy system goes down, your gas system goes down, then you're more willing to pay that ransom as quickly as possible. And that's what they're looking for. It's low impact for them, big impact for you. Next slide. Some of the more recent attacks that have made news: the July 4th attack of Kaseya was the largest ransomware attack to date. It locked up over 1,500 companies that work with that software management company, Kaseya. There was a $70 million ransom demand, and the bad guys were identified as this hacking group, ReEvil, or Revel, ReEvil, whichever way you want to. They are evil, so it's evil work. What we're seeing is that some of these hackers are acting like companies. They have board of directors, they have goals, they have hierarchies, they have employees who work at computer banks. And just, do you remember the old days of direct mail, where you would think, how does anybody ever make any money off direct mail? Well, it was a very low amount of money to send out all those postcards, but for the little fraction that somebody would send back, they would make more than enough money to cover that cost. That's kind of the same that we're seeing here. We've got companies that are just pushing out and hitting as many targets as they can. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm hopeful that most of your employees know not to click on those things, and you will not be those victims. Some of these bad actors have even made it where they lease out their services to other bad actors, because they've got an infrastructure and they know how to do it. So they can get hired by a company to say, we want to, attack this company, and they've got a system involved. Many of the attacks originate from Russia, Belarus, other Eastern European countries, North Korea, China, basically countries that either do not know what's going on there or are choosing to look the other way about these kinds of industries that are cropping up. Next slide. The Colonial Pipeline crisis was one of the most obvious ones that became an issue where most Americans were paying attention to ransomware. I'm sure many of you might not have heard of things like this before until that happened, and then it really impacts you, and then now we know all we wanted to know about ransomware. Just to regroup a little bit, on May 7th, which, God, seems like so long ago, but really was not, at 5 a.m. in the morning, an employee came in and noticed on the computer screen a ransom note. And that's oftentimes how it happens on all the computers in a company. You'll see a big ransom note flashing. And the response that Colonial Pipeline chose was to shut down the entire pipeline, because they could not get it done fast enough. And we'll talk about speed as we move along a little bit. The data was encrypted, and they just had to shut down the entire pipeline, which caused most of us on the East Coast to go without any gas, or at least feel like we were going without any gas and race over to top off and get crazy in line. Colonial eventually paid $5 million, which I remember at the time thinking, that's really not that much. I don't know that they knew what they had there when they started this. The FBI were able to, through connections, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the tabletop, were able to trace some of the money and get about $2 million of it back, but most of the rest of it was gone. Next slide. In response to this, because when something this big happens, everyone gets involved and everyone's interested in calling their legislators, and things need to change. An executive order came out on May 12th from the administration seeking up to a $10 million reward from any hackers locking up computer ransomware at vital US industries. And that's interesting to think about, vital US industries. That is a definition that might morph a little bit, and you never know what you would think would be vital, but you know, most manufacturing is going to be vital, utilities are going to be vital. This executive order restricts cryptocurrency transfers, and if you don't know what cryptocurrency is, we're going to learn a little bit about it today. The ransom is generally paid in cryptocurrency. It's not paid in cash, it's not paid through bank accounts, it's not traceable if it's cryptocurrency. So we're going to talk a little bit about things you can do to be prepared for that as well. It also urges cooperation from countries so that countries like Russia and other countries that seem like it is a budding industry to do this kind of thing might be held accountable a bit more. And it makes US institutions a bit more resilient to hacking. Regulations came in just this week or last week, where they are now requiring industries that have become victims of hacks or ransomware to report the incidents to the government within 12 hours. 12 hours is a very quick turnaround. Those of you that deal with international companies know that the EU's GDPR regulations require 72 hours. California's also require notice in 72 hours. 12 hours is a very quick turnaround. In that incident report, you must also include the details on things that are affected, the malicious software, the domains, the IP addresses, so that the federal government and the Justice Department can do as much investigation as quickly as possible. You also must designate a person who is available 24/7 to discuss security threats with the government. So that if something were to happen, the government has someone to call and know what's going on. They also require audits of security practices and search for security gaps. And that is a proactive step that I'm hoping that all of you are thinking about. If you haven't already started, you're getting ready to start. Those kinds of active involvement in your security helps for a lot of things. And we'll talk about some of the advantages of that in a few moments. Potential legislation, there are 2 current proposals in the House right now that have passed. They have moved on to the Senate. And what they will do is make the Department of Energy's role in cybersecurity a bit bigger and stronger. So we'll see what happens in the Senate. And then what's actually happening in this last couple of days is that some of the consumers and vendors that are affected by the shutdown are bringing lawsuits. So your customers who have been impacted by your shutdown or by the loss of their data also have the opportunity to bring lawsuits, and that's another response to this, unfortunately. Next slide. So the question is no longer what to do if your company is hacked, but what to do when you're hacked. Next slide. You can work your cyber incident response plan. And if those are words that you've never heard before, I'm hopeful that this is the first step that you're going to put something together. Just as you have been put in this new world where you've had to come up with an incident plan for a pandemic, you need to put together an incident response plan for an eventual cyber attack. Who do you call? Who are the people that need to be informed and on top of things? Do you have cybersecurity insurance? It's one of the most important pieces of this. And it's getting more and more difficult to even get that cybersecurity insurance. You need to show the insurance companies that you are doing due diligence on your side, that you are checking your systems, that you've updated your systems, that you're training your employees to even get that insurance in the first place. But it is helpful. Elaine was speaking before about a person she knew who had to pay a large ransom and then still never received the information and had to rebuild everything. That insurance could help cover that loss. Know your current cybersecurity landscape. Train your employees, your executives, and your board The board needs to be brought in at a certain point. They need to, sometimes board members have no experience whatsoever with cybersecurity. So they need to have been trained to be ready for this kind of thing as well. Be vigilant, review your plan, your phone tree, make sure it's current and it doesn't have people on there who have left your company 3 or 4 years ago, and that your training is up to date. Next slide. As part of your cyber incident response plan, you get a ransom note. It can be an email to a company's executive. It could be a text file left unencrypted on one of your servers. You don't know that unless you're actively checking your servers. It might be red banners on computers saying you've been infected. That, of course, would be the easiest way to find out. Generally, they contain instructions, access websites on the dark web. And the dark web, as you may know, I hope that you haven't had much experience with it. The dark web is a place for criminals. It's a place for criminals to trade information that is illegal to have. It used to be great stores of credit card data, but it is where money is transferred and all of that stuff. You want to know how much are they asking? The average in, sorry, that was supposed to be 2020, was 150,000, 250,000, depending on the size of the company and what was taken. How much time do you have to pay? The price may go up after a certain date. Do you have to hire a professional to negotiate? We're finding that some of these ransoms are negotiable, and it's a sticker price. They don't expect they're going to get that, but they'll negotiate down from there. I've even heard of strange examples where a charity has been hit and they've been able to negotiate with the bad actors and get things back for very little amount because it's a charity, because there's really no upside to keeping that information. So I wouldn't count on these bad actors having a heart, but sometimes it might happen. Do you have a cryptocurrency wallet? If cryptocurrency is something you've never heard of before, then the answer probably is no. You need to have a way to pay these people. If someone asked me today, how, send me $50,000 in Bitcoin, you need to know, how would you even do that? And many of the services that we're going to talk about in a few minutes have access to those wallets so that you can have money in there and use it if this were to happen. Next slide. Check your phone tree, make sure weekends, holidays, contingencies. Many of these attacks are happening on Fridays at 4 o'clock, holiday weekends. They strike when they know less people are around, less people to say, check this out, is this real? A panic situation seems like there's a quicker response, and be vigilant about weekends, who's on call. You can't just wait until the Tuesday after Memorial Day to get back to people. Do you have to engage counsel at a certain point? And if you do, who do you have on call? Are employees aware of the incident response plan? Do they know who to call? Someone might have come up with this plan, but does everyone in your organization know who to call and when to activate the plan? There are some regulatory compliance notice requirements that you need to be aware of. 72 hours for the EU, for California. Be aware of those things as part of your plan. Do you have a public relations plan? If it's a utility or a large company that will impact a great number of customers, if the system is shut down, it's going to make the news. Who's going to be the spokesperson? What are you going to say? You don't necessarily want to be ahead of the game, but you want to respond when questions come in. Next slide. Roughly 1/3 of American companies have cyber insurance. So that means 2/3 do not. You need to think about it if it's something that might impact you. It's increasingly difficult to obtain, as we talked about, and the cost is going up. A couple of years ago, it's like, oh, get cybersecurity insurance. Nobody really needs it, but you just keep paying it out and it's fine. Now it's paying out a lot, so they are a little stricter on who they take on and who they don't. The insurer can act as a hub, help you to investigate the attack, remediate compromised systems, negotiate a ransom. They know this system. Next slide. The cybersecurity companies are a cottage industry that have cropped up in response to these situations as well. They can help investigate, contain the damage, repair the system. They can negotiate with the bad guys. They also may know some of the bad guys. They might know another company that was hit by the same company or same bad actor, and they might be able to work that out. Always be aware, have good backups on hand, because if you need to rebuild your host system, that might be a great thing. Sometimes the backups are wrecked as well, and you might have to scratch it. Most companies end up paying. That is a terrible thing to say. I would like it to be that nobody pays and we wipe this out. But if it's $25,000 or $5 million for Colonial Pipeline to pay, that wasn't much to get their whole system back on when the entire East Coast was out of gas. So the bad guys know this. They're expecting that. I hope things change, but we need to be aware of this landscape in case something like this happens. Next slide. The next couple of slides I have are a tabletop. Tabletops are a great example of a crisis situation and take you through day by day some of the things that could happen. I don't want to spend too much time on this here. I put it here for you as a leave behind, because this will be available on the website for the chamber. They're making it available to all of you and for other members as well. It takes some time on your own to go through some of this, and it works through, and next slide, we can kind of go through some of the slides pretty quickly. This is an example of a fitness company that has collected health and wellness data, IP addresses, usernames and passwords, credit card information, pretty much everything that you could think of, they collect. And next slide. And the slides work through the initial attack, how things happen. An employee receives an email from a security researcher called White Knight, and stating there's a vulnerability in the app, and then they go through and they find out that there actually is a vulnerability, and the steps that are taken in day 1, day 2, day 3, day 80, and you can kind of go through them. One thing that I caution you all to be aware of is your vendor contracts, and keeping some clauses in your vendor contracts to make sure that they are as vigilant with their cybersecurity as you are with yours, because you're opening the door to them and you never know who they are opening the door to. So be aware of some of the questions to ask, things to be aware of if the media gets involved, and keep going. How to handle other regulations that come in with credit card information being used. If celebrities or government officials are involved, do you need to contact Secret Service? Do you need to contact publicists, that kind of thing? The FBI is asking for things. Third parties are implicated. Again, going to your vendors, making sure that they are compliant with the same rules and regulations you are. Next slide. Some of the investigative findings, forensic companies that you might know about. Thinking about the insurance plans, when you're negotiating your insurance policy, you might have certain investigators you want to use, certain attorneys you want to use. Be sure that you might want to put that in your policy so that you have that assured and it's a one-call situation and you're not looking around for a bench attorney at that point. So yeah, so the rest of the slides go through the crisis, and it's a good resource to have to get you thinking about issues that might come up. And I would like now to open it up to some questions. We've got, oh gosh, we went a little longer. Got a few minutes for questions. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share or ask? Doesn't seem like there are any. So then maybe
you mentioned Bitcoin.
Yes.
And of course, I've heard about it and read a little bit about it, but should we get more knowledgeable about Bitcoin as we move forward? Is that something I was hearing here today?
Yes, that's an entirely different presentation, but you should be familiar with cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is one of the cryptocurrencies. It tends to be the somewhat more stable one. It's a currency that is based on transactions. It is not based on pieces of gold that are in a bank somewhere, which I don't even know that any currency is based on that anymore, but originally that's what it was. So it's just based on trading, and it has different values depending on how much is traded at any particular time. But what happens is it's a non-traceable way to transfer money. So you purchase the Bitcoin is sent as ransom, and then immediately it is split up into hundreds of companies. So it's almost impossible to trace where the money goes to, because it's so easy to split it apart and send it to different entities and reroute it, so that the Justice Department is having a very difficult time, which it used to be, follow the money and you can find out where the bad guys are. But the money is now in digital assets, and it's harder and harder to trace.
All right. Does anybody else have a question? You can raise your hand or just ask. Because I one of the cyber insurance.
Yeah, cybersecurity insurance.
Is that we would check with our regular insurance agencies, or is there a special agency for that?
I would begin by checking with your regular insurance companies. They may offer cybersecurity insurance. And if they do not, they will know who does and who reputable people are. So if you have an existing relationship with a good insurance company, stick with them and trust who they're going to direct you to. I think the overall message that I want you all to come away with is to be actively involved in your billing, in your training, in your cybersecurity involvement. And your relationships with trusted individuals are helpful to be those first calls. Know what's coming and be prepared for it, so that you don't just get a random call from a company saying, we're a cybersecurity insurance company and we'd like to talk to you. But that could be fraud as well. So go with people you trust. Use the Chamber of Commerce as a resource. If you don't have anyone that you trust, I'm sure they have plenty of people that they can direct you to, and try to be as prepared as possible.
Does anyone have any questions? I just want to say, this has just been so eye-opening. And yes, we were hit with the telephone hack, and I also a number of times got that big red thing on my computer saying we've been hacked, and I called our IT people and they took care of that. But this is something, as we go forward, just like we prepare for our hurricanes and everything else, I think this is something that we really need to know, that we have a policy and a procedure to move forward. Because once, I can tell you from experience, once you have it in your hand, the clock is ticking against you, and most of the times you will not recoup what is lost, whether it is funding or the confidential information you may have. For the chamber, a lot of us is confidential information. But again, is anyone, Simone, do you have anything else?
No, I don't, and I don't see any questions through the chat.
Leslie, thank you so much. And we are going to be putting this on our website and drawing some, and also advertising that it's there. So thank you so very, very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And just where everybody knows, Leslie in Charlotte has great weather. So we are so pleased.
We do have great weather today
with her, and ours may get better in a day or two. But anyway, Thank everyone so much, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Thank you, Leslie.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, bye-bye.